Andre Washington was 36 years old, and until that Wednesday afternoon, he believed he was flying home to the woman he was going to spend his life with. He was a logistics operations manager who had renovated his grandfather's Nashville home with his own two hands. Every floor, every wall, every room a decision he made and paid for alone. His fiancée Priya had his ring on her finger, access to his savings account, and a key to a house that held 3 generations of his family's legacy. What she did not have was any idea what kind of man she had underestimated. Andre's contract in Phoenix wrapped 2 weeks early. He did not call ahead. He wanted to surprise her. When he pushed open the backyard gate and saw the white chairs, the floral arch, the string quartet, and Priya in a wedding dress holding another man's hands, in his backyard, at a wedding funded with $22,000 from his own bank account, he stood at that gate for 11 full seconds. Then he turned around, walked back to his truck, and made a single phone call. Priya thought he was going to fold. She had no idea what was already in motion. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The departures board flickered at 5:47 in the morning, and Andre Washington watched it the way he watched everything, steadily, without rush, waiting for it to tell him what he needed to know. Nashville, Gate C12, delayed. New departure, 7:20 a.m. He exhaled through his nose, settled back into the hard plastic chair, set both hands on his knees. Around him, the Phoenix airport was still half asleep. A janitor pushed a wide mop across the tile floor in long, lazy arcs. A coffee kiosk 2 gates down was just opening its shutters, the smell of dark roast drifting through the terminal like something honest. A young soldier in uniform slept across 3 chairs with his hat over his face, his duffel bag tucked under his boots like he'd done it 100 times. Andre watched all of it. He noticed things. He always had. It was the same skill that made him good at his job, the ability to see a whole system at once, to spot the part that didn't belong, the number that didn't add up, the sequence that was off by a step. He'd built his career on that skill. Started with nothing but a community college enrollment form and a full-time warehouse job. Took night classes for 4 years while other men his age were sleeping, and clawed his way into a logistics operations role that now paid him more than anyone in his family had ever made. Not that he talked about that. That wasn't his style. His 2 duffel bags sat at his feet, packed tight and neat the way he packed everything. 2 months in Phoenix, an infrastructure contract for a regional distribution company that had been hemorrhaging money because nobody understood their own supply chain. Andre had understood it inside of a week. His team had the whole thing restructured and running clean in 6 weeks flat, 2 full weeks ahead of the projected timeline. The client had shaken his hand 4 times. His regional director had called him before he even got to the rental car lot. "Andre, I don't know how you do it." "Same way every time," he'd said. "Start at the beginning. Don't skip steps." He reached down and unzipped the front pocket of his bag, pulling out his phone. 6:01 a.m. He scrolled to Priya's name and pressed call. It rang 4 times. Then her voicemail, her voice warm and practiced, the kind of warmth that felt like a whole room opening up. "Hey, you've reached Priya. Leave me something good." He hung up without leaving a message. Typed instead. "Hey, flight got pushed back. Should be home by mid-afternoon. Can't wait to see you." The 2 gray check marks turned blue almost immediately. Red. No reply. He looked at the screen for a moment, then smiled to himself. She was probably still in bed, one eye open, phone face down again by her elbow the way she always slept with it. She'd see the message when she woke up properly and call him back before he boarded. He pocketed the phone and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and thought about the house. That was what happened whenever he had quiet time and nowhere to be. His mind went home. Specifically, it went to the kitchen, the one he'd retiled himself over a long 4th of July weekend 3 years ago. White subway tile with dark grout, clean and sharp and exactly right. Then it went to the back porch, the one he'd rebuilt from raw lumber after the original rotted through. Then to the front hallway. The floors he'd refinished by hand, sanding them down 3 times before the stain took the way he wanted. His grandfather's house. James Earl Washington had owned that property in a quiet Nashville neighborhood since 1974, back when a black man owning property in that part of the city meant something that went beyond square footage. James Earl had told Andre that exactly once, sitting on that back porch the summer Andre turned 14. He hadn't needed to say it twice. Andre had inherited the house 5 years ago. By then, it needed work, the kind of slow, honest work that a building collects over decades. He'd done almost all of it himself. Weekends, holidays, vacation days he never spent anywhere else. Some people found that strange. He never bothered explaining it. Some things you don't explain. You just build them. A memory surfaced, quiet and unbidden. He and Priya, maybe 4 months into their engagement. A Saturday morning. She'd been sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee, scrolling something on her tablet, and she'd looked up at him with that easy smile of hers and asked, almost like it was nothing, "Hey, whose name is actually on the deed? Like, is it just yours, or is it part of some family thing?" He'd laughed, told her it was a family trust situation, said it like it was the most boring answer in the world, because to him it was. She'd nodded and looked back at her tablet. He hadn't thought about it again until right now, for no reason he could name. He let the memory go. Gate C12 lit up on the board. Boarding in 40 minutes. Andre picked up his bags, stood, and rolled his shoulders once. He was going home. Priya would be surprised. They'd order from that Thai place she liked. He'd tell her about Phoenix, and she'd tell him everything he'd missed. And the house would smell the way it always did when she'd been there. A little like her perfume, a little like candles, warm in a way that had taken him a long time to recognize as his own life feeling complete. He walked toward the gate. He was happy. The rideshare turned onto his street at 2:14 in the afternoon, and Andre noticed the cars before anything else. That was the thing about being wired the way he was. His eyes catalogued details before his brain decided whether they mattered. And this, both curbs packed solid for half a block in either direction, cars he didn't recognize, a black catering van parked with 2 wheels on the grass. This was a detail that mattered. He leaned forward slightly in the back seat. "Right here is fine," he said. The driver pulled over. Andre shouldered both bags, climbed out, and stood on the sidewalk. The street was quiet in the way streets get, when all the noise has been pulled to one place. No kids out. No one walking dogs. Even the birds seemed to have relocated. And above the fence line at the far end of his property, white canvas rose against the blue afternoon sky. A tent. A big one. He almost smiled. She threw me a party. That was pure Priya. She was good at things like that. Gestures that felt spontaneous, but had clearly been planned for weeks. He should have suspected something when she didn't answer his call. She'd probably been coordinating with people all morning. He thought about texting her. I can see the tent, and decided against it. Let her have the reveal. He adjusted the bag on his shoulder and walked up the block. The side gate was unlocked, same as always. He pushed it open with 2 fingers and stepped through. He stopped. His backyard was gone. Not physically. The oak tree was still there. The porch railing he'd sanded smooth was still there. But everything else had been replaced with something else entirely. White folding chairs arranged in perfect rows, 70 or more, and almost every one of them filled. People in formal clothes, the women in gowns and heels, the men in suits and ties, everyone facing away from him. Tall floral arches framed an aisle that ran straight from where he was standing all the way to the far end of the yard. The ground beneath it scattered with rose petals, deep red against the green grass, deliberate and exact. A string quartet stood to the left, mid-song, something slow and ceremonial that filled the whole yard. And at the far end of that aisle, beneath an arch draped in white flowers and trailing ivy, Priya, in a white dress, holding the hands of a man Andrei had never seen in his life. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with light skin and close-cut hair, wearing a cream suit with a white flower pinned to the lapel. He was looking at Priya. Priya was looking at him. They were leaning toward each other the way people lean when they are saying something true, and an officiant in a gray suit stood between them with an open book, speaking words that floated across the yard without reaching Andrei's ears, because the only thing his ears seemed to work for right now was the sound of his own blood. He counted later. 11 seconds. He stood at that gate for 11 full seconds, and he did not move a single inch. He watched the officiant's mouth move. He watched the man in the cream suit nod. He watched Priya's shoulders rise and fall with a slow breath, the kind you take when you are about to say something you have been practicing. And then, as if she felt the exact weight of being looked at, Priya turned her head. Across 70-some guests, across rose petals and folding chairs and the soft pull of a violin, her eyes found his. The color left her face like someone had pulled a drain. The violin stopped first, then the others, one by one, trailing off into silence. A woman in the third row turned to see what the bride was looking at. Then the man beside her turned. Then another. A low ripple of movement spread backward through the crowd, heads swiveling, until Andrei felt the weight of the whole yard looking at him. He didn't look back at them. He looked at the house, at the porch railing, at the oak tree in the corner his grandfather had planted the year his mother was born, at the back wall he'd repainted 2 summers ago, a warm gray, 2 coats, a full weekend. He looked back at Priya. She had not moved. The man in the cream suit was looking at him now too, confused, his hands still loosely holding hers. Andrei said nothing. He turned around and walked back through the gate. His truck was parked 2 blocks over, where he'd left it before Phoenix. He found it, unlocked it, put both bags on the passenger seat. He got in and closed the door, and the sound of it sealing shut was the quietest sound he had ever heard. He put both hands on the steering wheel. He breathed in, held it, breathed out. His knuckles were dry against the leather. His jaw was tight. That was all. He did not cry. He sat there for 1 full minute, breathing like it was a task that required his full attention, and then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled to a name, pressed call. It rang once. Andrei. Travis's voice was easy, unsuspecting. You back? Yeah, Andrei said. I need you to clear your afternoon. A beat. Where are you? My truck. He paused. It's bad, Trav. The line went quiet for exactly 1 second. Then, I'm clearing it. Come now. Travis Okafor's office was on the 4th floor of a building off Charlotte Avenue, glass-fronted and quiet. The kind of place where serious things happened in calm voices. Andrei knew the layout by heart. He'd sat in that waiting room during Travis's bar exam celebration, during his first big closing. During the afternoon, Travis got the call that his father had died. The office had seen a lot. It would see one more thing today. He took the stairs. Travis was in the hallway when Andrei stepped off the last landing, like he'd been listening for footsteps. He was still in his dress shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a legal pad tucked under one arm. He took one look at Andrei's face and turned back to the open conference room behind him. Marcus, he said to the young associate inside, pack it up. We'll finish tomorrow. A brief pause. We've got the Hendricks Depot at tomorrow, Travis said again. Even. Final. Marcus packed it up. The conference room was plain. Long table, 6 chairs, a whiteboard with old notes that hadn't been erased yet, a window that looked out over a parking structure. Travis closed the door, pulled out the chair nearest Andre, and sat down. Not across from him. Next to him. "Go ahead," he said. So Andre talked. He laid it out the same way he'd run every project in the last decade, start to finish. No editorializing, just the sequence of events in the order they happened. The flight, the cars on the street, the tent above the fence line, the gate. What was on the other side of it? He described the chairs, the arch, the rose petals, the string quartet, the man in the cream suit. He described 11 seconds. He described driving to his truck and sitting there with both hands on the wheel. He described the way Priya's face looked when she saw him. Travis listened to all of it without making a sound. Not a single interjection. Not one damn or man or sharp breath. He just listened with his full attention. The way he'd learned to in law school and never unlearned. The kind of listening that made people feel both heard and slightly exposed, because there was nowhere to hide inside it. When Andre finished, the room held the silence for a moment. Then Travis opened his laptop. "Keep talking if there's more," he said. "I'm not done listening. That's all I've got." "Okay." Travis was already typing. "Let me look at something." His fingers moved. Andre watched the glow of the screen reflect off his glasses. Outside, a truck rumbled through the parking structure below. Someone's phone rang in a distant office and was answered immediately. Travis went still. He leaned forward slightly, eyes moving across the screen. Then he turned the laptop so Andre could see it. "Marriage license," Travis said. His voice was flat and careful. "Priya Holloway and Brett Calloway. Filed with the Davidson County Clerk's Office." He tapped the corner of the screen. Filed date. Andre looked at it. 6 weeks ago. He was in Phoenix 6 weeks ago. He'd just passed the midpoint of the contract. He remembered the week because his site supervisor had taken the crew out for dinner after they hit an early milestone. He had called Priya that night from his hotel room. She had laughed at something he said and told him she missed him. 6 weeks ago, she was filing a marriage license. He sat back in his chair. "That's not a woman who got swept away," Travis said. "That's a woman who had a calendar." Andre nodded once, slowly. It settled in the way cold water settles. Not all at once, but thoroughly. She hadn't panicked into this. She hadn't fallen into something she couldn't control. She had built a timeline. Marry Brett. Let the wedding happen. Then come back to Andre with the ring still on her finger and the facts laid out in front of him, and apply just enough pressure, maybe some tears, maybe a lawyer, maybe both, and expect him to clear out of a house he had inherited, renovated, and paid taxes on for 6 years. She had expected him to fold. The thought sat in his chest like a weight that had a specific shape. Andre. Travis was watching him carefully. "Whose name is on the deed? And how is it held?" Andre looked at him. "That," he said, "is the right question. We need to find out exactly what kind of ownership it is. Title structure matters here. Everything matters." Andre was quiet for a moment. Then he took his phone off the table. He scrolled to a contact and pressed call. It rang twice. "Aunt Carol," he said, when she picked up. "I need you to pull the family property trust document. All of them. Tonight, if you can." A pause on her end. Then, in the precise and unhurried voice of a woman who had spent 30 years handling documents that determined people's fates. "Where do you need me?" "Travis's office. Give me an hour." He ended the call and set the phone back on the table. Travis had not looked away from him. Andre met his eyes for a moment, then looked at the window, then closed his eyes. One breath in, one breath out. He opened them. "Okay," he said. Not to Travis, exactly. To himself, to the room, to whatever version of the next few weeks was already being assembled somewhere in the part of his mind that always ran slightly ahead of the moment. Travis reached for his legal pad. They got to work. Carol Washington arrived at 7:14 p.m. Andre heard her before he saw her. The particular rhythm of her heels in the hallway, measured and unhurried, the same cadence she'd carried through 30 years of county clerk corridors. She came through the conference room door with a manila folder tucked under one arm and her reading glasses already on top of her head, ready to be pulled down the moment they were needed. She set the folder on the table without preamble. "Everything's in there," she said. "Original deed transfer, trust instrument, all the amendments. I've had it organized since your grandfather passed." She looked at Andre, just for a moment, with something that wasn't quite sympathy. It was older than that. More like recognition. "You did the right thing calling me first." She sat down. Travis was already reaching for the folder. The trust document was 15 pages, printed on paper that had gone slightly cream with age. Travis read it the way he read everything. Fast on the surface, slow underneath, his eyes moving line by line while his hand held a pen he hadn't written with yet. Carol walked him through it anyway. "Your grandfather structured this deliberately," she said, tapping a paragraph midway through the 3rd page. "He didn't want the property sold out from under the family in a moment of crisis. Foreclosure, divorce, debt. He'd seen it happen to other families. So the trust has a protective clause." She slid her glasses down. "No transfer, no listing, no encumbrance of any kind without written approval from both executors. Andre is the primary. I am the co-executor." Travis underlined something. "That approval requirement, it survives marriage?" "Survives everything," Carol said, without blinking. "The trust predates any subsequent ownership claim. It doesn't dissolve because Andre got engaged. It doesn't dissolve because of a common law argument or a quasi-marital claim. It doesn't dissolve because someone filed paperwork at a courthouse." She paused. "Priya could have married him and still not touch this property without my signature." The room was quiet. Andre was looking at the document. He had known the house was held in trust. His grandfather had told him that much the day he handed over the keys. But he had never read the mechanics closely. He trusted the architecture without inspecting every beam. He understood, sitting there, that his grandfather had built something stronger than he knew. "She was planning to list it," Travis said. He had opened a new browser window. His jaw was tight. "I want to check something," he typed. He searched. He pulled up a real estate database, cross-referenced a Nashville MLS draft portal through a professional access login, and went quiet for a long moment. Then he turned the laptop around. It was a listing draft, not yet published. The address was Andre's house. The photos were interior shots of rooms Andre had renovated, the kitchen he'd retiled in November, the sunroom he'd rebuilt from the studs. The listing described the property with careful enthusiasm. Under ownership status, in the designated field, someone had typed, "Co-owner pending transfer." Priya Holloway's name was in the contact field. Andre looked at it. He did not look at it for very long. "Save that," he said. Travis already had. Andre pulled up his banking app. His thumb moved through the joint account, the one they'd opened together for household expenses, utilities, groceries, the small, ordinary costs of a shared life. He started scrolling through 4 months of transactions. He read the names. He kept his face still while something in his chest went very quiet and very cold. Elegant Events Catering, $3,200. Southern Bloom Florals, $2,800. Premier Tent and Event Rentals, $1,950. Harmony String Quartet, $1,400. Officiant Services of Tennessee, $450. Captured Moments Photography, $2,600. There were more, smaller ones threaded between them, a cake deposit, a calligrapher for programs, a linen rental, parking attendants. He added them while he scrolled. By the time he reached the end of the 4-month window, the number was $22,000. $22,000. He set the phone face down on the table. The room went quiet. Even Travis, who had seen a lot of bad things done to people through financial paperwork, sat very still for a moment. Carol looked at her hands. Andre breathed in once, then out. "I want every dollar documented," he said. Travis was already on his feet, moving to the printer. Andre's phone lit up on the table. Face down, it still buzzed. A call, not a text. He picked it up, looked at the screen. "Mama." He answered. "I heard something happened over at your house today," Dot said. Her voice was level, but the kind of level that meant she had already made several decisions in private. "Somebody from the auxiliary called me." "It happened," Andre said. "I'll tell you everything." "Not tonight." A pause. He could hear her breathing, steady and deliberate. "Andre," she said his name like it meant something specific. "What do you need from me?" "Not yet, Mama," he said. "But soon." "Okay." Another pause. "You eating?" "I'm fine." "That wasn't what I asked." "I'll eat," he said. She let it go. They said goodbye, and he set the phone back down. Travis set a warm stack of printed pages in front of him, without comment. He checked into a hotel on West End at 9:40 that night. Not because he had to, because he chose to. He paid for 3 nights in cash at the front desk, put his bag down inside the room, and sat on the edge of the bed. The walls were beige. The lamp on the nightstand was the same lamp that was in every hotel room in every city he'd ever worked in. Outside, Nashville moved through its evening without knowing anything about what he knew. He sat there and stared at the wall, and he began, quietly and methodically, to build what came next. 2 days passed. Andre kept to his routine the way he always did, not because it came easy, but because routine was armor. He was up by 6 each morning. Coffee from the lobby machine. Laptop open by 6:30. He answered emails, reviewed logistics reports from his team, and handled a scheduling issue on a Denver contract without missing a beat. His manager didn't know anything was wrong. Nobody at work did. That was deliberate. Every afternoon he drove to Travis's office. They spread documents across the conference table and went through everything line by line. Travis had retained the forensic accountant, a woman named Greta Mbiki, who had already begun cross-referencing the bank records against vendor invoices. The picture she was building was thorough, damning, the kind of clean that held up in court. Andre worked. He ate when he remembered to. He slept in 4-hour stretches. On the 3rd morning, he came down to the lobby to get coffee and found Priya standing near the front desk. She had dressed for this. That was the first thing he noticed, the careful selection of it. A soft green blouse, her hair down, just enough makeup to look like she wasn't wearing any. She looked like someone who wanted to seem like she hadn't tried, and had tried very hard to achieve that. She saw him, and her face opened into something that was almost relief. Andre. She said his name the way she used to, warm, like it belonged to her. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "There's a sitting area by the window." They sat across from each other in 2 chairs near the lobby's east windows. The morning light came in flat and gray. A business traveler rolled a suitcase past them without looking up. Priya started talking. She had clearly rehearsed it. The words came out too smoothly, in too clean a sequence, like someone performing a speech they had practiced in the mirror. She told him that what happened, the wedding, the backyard, all of it, had not been planned the way it looked. That feelings were complicated, that Brett had been a part of her life for a long time, and that she had struggled with it privately, alone, without wanting to hurt anyone. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said. Her eyes were steady. "I want you to know that." Andre nodded once. Slowly, she moved forward. She said he was a good man, a great man, but that he had always been a little distant, hadn't he? A little unreachable. That she had felt lonely sometimes, even when they were in the same room. That she didn't blame him. It was just who he was. Andre said nothing. He let her finish. She folded her hands in her lap and got to the part she had really come to say. She and Brett were committed now, she told him. It was real. And given that, Given the situation, she thought it would make the most sense for everyone if Andre found somewhere comfortable to land. She said it gently, like she was doing him a favor, like she was handing him an exit he should be grateful for. "You can start fresh," she said. "You're strong like that." Andre looked at her for a moment. Then he stood up and said, "You want coffee?" She blinked. "Sure." He came back with 2 cups from the machine by the elevator. He handed her one and sat back down. She wrapped both hands around the cup, and her posture softened. Her shoulders came down slightly. She took this as something. She began talking about the house with a little more ease now. The neighborhood, the space, the way it made sense for them to handle the transition as adults. She used the word transition twice. Andre let her talk. He drank his coffee. His face was calm and completely unreadable, which she had always interpreted as agreement. When she finished, he set his cup down on the side table and looked at her directly. "Are you happy, Priya?" he asked. She paused, recalibrated. "Yes," she said. "I really am." He nodded. "Good." He stood up. "I'll be in touch through my attorney." She stared at him. Something shifted in her face. Not quite confusion, not quite alarm, but the beginning of both. She opened her mouth and then closed it. Andre picked up his coffee cup, said nothing further, and walked toward the elevator. He heard her leave the lobby before the elevator doors closed. He went back to his room, set the cup on the nightstand, and sat down in the chair by the window. He waited 30 seconds, enough time, then called Travis. "She was just here," he said. "She thinks I'm going to fold." Travis didn't miss a beat. "Good," he said. "Let her." Andre looked out the window at the Nashville skyline, gray and wide and completely indifferent. One small, cold smile crossed his face. It didn't reach his eyes. It didn't need to. The following morning, Travis's conference room looked different. The long oak table was covered now. Not cluttered, but organized. Stacks of paper sorted by category. Bank statements in one column, vendor receipts in another, the property trust documents anchoring the far left like a foundation. Travis had color-coded the folders. Yellow for the property, red for the financials, blue for correspondence. Andre sat on one side. Carol sat across from him. Travis stood at the head of the table with his reading glasses on, which meant he was in work mode and the room should adjust accordingly. "Let's go in order," Travis said. Carol went first. She opened the yellow folder and removed a single-page document. Clean, typed, formally notarized. She had prepared it the night before with the same precision she had applied to 30 years of county records. Her handwriting on the signature line was small and exact. "This is the formal invocation of the protective clause," she said. She didn't explain it further. She didn't need to. "No transfer, no listing, no encumbrance, not without my signature." She slid it across the table to Travis. "And I won't be signing anything." Travis took it, reviewed it briefly, and set it on top of the yellow folder. "That closes the property door permanently," he said. Carol folded her hands. "That's the idea." Andre looked at the document for a moment. One sheet of paper. 3 decades of his grandfather's foresight compressed into a single clause that Priya had never known to look for. He thought about the real estate listing draft, co-owner pending transfer, and said nothing. Travis moved to the red folder. He had filed the civil claim that morning, before the meeting. He walked them through it. $22,000 in documented withdrawals from the joint account, cross-referenced against vendor invoices Greta had spent 2 days tracking down and matching. Catering company, floral vendor, tent and chair rental, officiant's fee, wedding photographer, the string quartet. Every dollar had a receipt. Every receipt had a timestamp. Every timestamp lined up. "Greta's report is certified," Travis said. "It'll hold." Andre picked up one of the bank statements and scanned it. He had looked at these numbers before, but seeing them organized like this, clean, sequential, airtight, made something settle in his chest. Not comfort, certainty. "She bring anything else?" he asked. Travis paused, just briefly. He opened the red folder to the last page and set it in front of Andre. "She flagged one more transaction," Travis said, about halfway through the review. Andre looked down at the page. It was a single-line item. A payment of $4,800, processed 8 months ago. The recipient, a venue called Whitmore Estate Events. The memo field read, "Initial deposit, reservation hold." Andre read it again, then a third time, 8 months ago. He had bought Priya's engagement ring 7 months ago. He knew the exact date because he had saved for it for 6 months, researched it for 2, and picked it up on a Thursday afternoon and driven straight home with it sitting in his coat pocket, barely breathing. She had paid a deposit on a wedding venue before he bought the ring. She had been planning her exit before she said yes. He closed the folder, set both hands flat on top of it. The room was very quiet. "How long?" he said. "Was she never mine?" Nobody answered. Carol looked at her hands. Travis looked at Andre. The silence sat between all three of them like something solid. After a moment, Travis reached over and moved the folder aside, gently but deliberately, the way you move something out of someone's reach before they can do something with it. "Last piece," he said. Andre looked up. "Priya's mother," Travis said. "Ruth Holloway." Andre nodded. He had already been thinking about this. He had thought about a dozen ways to handle what came next. A public statement, a direct confrontation, a message through Brett's people, and he had dismissed all of them. Too loud, too easy for Priya to reframe, too much room for her to get ahead of the story. But Ruth Holloway was different. Ruth was a retired nurse, a churchwoman. She had deep roots in the community, the kind of woman people called when something important happened, not when something dramatic happened. If Priya's image was a building, Ruth was one of the load-bearing walls. She didn't know what her daughter had done. Not the marriage license, not the money, not the venue deposit paid before the engagement ring. She was going to. "I need my mother to reach out to her," Andre said. "Set up a face-to-face meeting. Nothing confrontational, just a conversation." Travis didn't question it. He had learned, across 30-plus years of friendship, that Andre's instincts about sequencing were rarely wrong. Andre called Dot on the way to his car. He gave her the short version. Ruth Holloway, a meeting, soon. Dot didn't ask for details. She said, "I'll call her tonight." She did. Ruth Holloway picked up on the second ring. She listened to Dot's request. "A meeting, just a conversation," she said, and agreed without hesitation, her voice warm and unsuspecting. She assumed it was about reconciliation. She had no reason to think otherwise. That evening, Andre returned to his hotel room, set his shoes by the door, and was asleep before 10 o'clock. The first real sleep he'd had in days. The house was quiet when he arrived. Andre sat in his truck for a moment first, engine off, looking at the front of it. The porch light was still on from whenever Priya had last left. The gutters he had resealed 2 winters ago caught the morning sun at the right angle and threw a thin strip of light across the walkway. The flower beds along the foundation were overgrown. She had never watered them. He got out of the truck. His key still worked. Of course it did. It was his house. He started in the kitchen. It was the first room he had finished, back when the house was still more project than home. He had spent 3 weekends pulling up the old linoleum, brittle, yellowed at the edges, curling away from the corners like something trying to escape. Underneath it, the original subfloor, rough and splintered but solid. He had laid the new tile himself, a warm cream porcelain with thin gray grout lines, straight and even. He had measured twice before he set a single piece. He stood in the middle of it now and looked at the floor. The tile was still level, still clean at the seams, still exactly what he had intended it to be. He moved to the porch. The back porch had been the hardest job. The original decking had been rotted through in 3 spots. soft under your foot, in a way that made your stomach drop before your brain caught up. He had torn the whole thing down to the concrete pier footings and rebuilt it from the subfloor up. New joists, new decking boards. He had stained them himself, on his knees with a brush, working section by section in the heat of a July weekend. He crouched down now and pressed 2 fingers against the decking near the threshold. Still firm, still sealed. He stood and looked out past the porch railing, the backyard. He didn't look away from it. The tent was gone. The chairs were gone. The floral arches and the rose petals and the string quartet and the 70-plus people in their formal clothes. All of it gone, like it had been packed up and carried away, like it had never happened. But the grass was still pressed flat in rows where the chairs had stood. There was a faint rectangle of trampled earth where the tent stakes had gone into the ground. And along the center of the yard, his grandfather's yard, the yard the old man had mowed every Saturday morning for 40 years, there was a pale strip where the rose petals had lain. The grass underneath still matted down, not yet recovered. André looked at it. He let himself feel it, all of it, the grief first. And it was grief, real and heavy, not just for Priya, but for the version of the future he had already built out in his head. The one where the house was full on holidays, where the kitchen he tiled smelled like something cooking, where the porch he rebuilt held 2 chairs instead of 1. He had believed in that future completely. That was the part that cost the most. Not the money, not the property, the believing. Then the anger. It moved through him slow and hot, like something poured rather than struck. $22,000. A venue deposit paid before he bought the ring. A marriage license filed while he was in Phoenix, thinking he was building something with her. She had sat across from him at this table, his table, and looked him in the eye and performed a woman in love, and she had been running a schedule the entire time. He stood with all of it for a long moment. Then he set it down, not forgetting, not forgiving, just setting it where it belonged, in the folder, with the bank statements and the trust documents and the certified receipts, evidence, not weight he was taking with him. He breathed out slowly through his nose. He heard the front door behind him, Dot's key in the lock. She came in carrying a foil-covered dish, something baked by the smell of it, and set it on the kitchen counter without fanfare. She looked at him standing at the back window and did not say anything about his face. She sat down at the kitchen table. He sat across from her. She pulled the foil back on the dish. He didn't look at it. "You should eat," she said. "I know." He didn't. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Dot looked around the kitchen slowly, at the tile floor, at the cabinets he had refinished, at the window trim he had stripped and repainted twice before the color was right. "Your grandfather built something real," she said. Her voice was even and dry, the way it always was when she meant something completely. "You built on top of it. That's in your blood." She looked at him. "She can't take that." "Nobody can take that." André looked at the table. He nodded once. Then he said, "I'm ready. Can you confirm the meeting with Ruth for this afternoon?" Dot picked up her phone. André turned back to the kitchen window. Outside, the flattened grass caught the midday light. The yard was still. His hands rested at his sides, loose and open. He was carrying nothing he didn't intend to use. Ruth Holloway's house was the kind of clean that took real effort, not the surface clean of someone expecting company. The deep kind, the kind that came from decades of habit. The baseboards were white. The curtains were pressed. The coffee table held a small ceramic vase with 3 yellow flowers in it, and beside the vase, a coaster already set out for each of them. She had made tea. André noticed all of it when he walked in. He noticed the framed scripture on the wall above the television, The family photos arranged in a careful arc on the side table. Priya at maybe 10 years old in a church dress. Priya at graduation. A Christmas picture with Ruth in the center, looking proud and certain. He noticed the way Ruth carried herself when she walked them to the sofa. Straight-backed, composed, the posture of a woman who had spent decades projecting calm in rooms where other people were falling apart. She poured the tea and sat down across from them. Her hands were steady. "I'm glad you called," she said. She looked at Andrei with something careful in her eyes. Not warmth, exactly, but the approximation of it. The look of a woman prepared to hear something difficult and manage it gracefully. "I know this has been hard. I want you to know that." Andrei nodded. He set his folder on his knee. "Thank you for seeing us, Ms. Ruth." His voice was quiet and even. "I'm going to show you some things. I'd ask that you let me get through all of it before you say anything." Something shifted in her face. Just slightly. She set her teacup down. "All right," she said. He opened the folder. He started with the marriage license. He placed it on the coffee table and turned it so she could read it clearly. Priya Holloway, Brett Calloway. Filed 6 weeks ago. Ruth looked at it for a long time. She didn't touch it. Her expression didn't break. It changed, the way ice changes when the temperature drops 1 more degree. Something in it went very still. Then the bank statements. He laid them out one by one, each page paper-clipped to its corresponding vendor receipt. He had organized it the way he organized everything. Clean, sequential, nothing out of place. He pointed to each withdrawal as he named it. The catering company, the florist, the tent rental, the officiant's fee, the photographer, the string quartet. $22,000. 4 months of withdrawals from a joint account funded largely by his income, spent on a wedding to another man. Ruth's jaw tightened. She said nothing. He placed the next page down. "This one is from 8 months ago," he said. He kept his voice the same as it had been from the beginning. No harder, no softer, just precise. A venue deposit, $4,800, from the same account. He let her do the math herself. He watched her do it. 8 months ago, before the engagement ring, before the proposal, before she would have told Ruth about any of it. Ruth Holloway looked at that page for a very long time. He gave her the real estate listing draft next, Priya's name in the co-owner field, the address of his grandfather's house. He placed the trust documents beside it, Carol's protective clause, the co-executor designation, the formal notice Travis had already filed. Every door Priya had tried to open, already sealed. When he finished, he folded his hands on top of the folder and waited. The room was very quiet. The clock above the television moved. One of Ruth's yellow flowers had dropped a petal onto the table, and it lay there between the documents like something that had given up. Ruth Holloway sat perfectly still. Then she said, "Does Brett's family know?" "Not yet," Andrei said. "That's Priya's problem to solve." Ruth nodded once. She looked at the documents still spread across her coffee table. She did not look at Dot. She did not look back at Andrei. He gathered the papers carefully and returned them to the folder. He stood. Dot stood beside him. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Ruth," he said. "I mean that." Ruth didn't stand to walk them out. She stayed exactly where she was, her hands folded in her lap, her tea cold in the cup beside her. Outside, the afternoon air was warm and still. Andrei and Dot walked to the truck. He held the door for her out of habit. He started the engine. He pulled out of the neighborhood and drove. Dot said nothing. She looked out the passenger window. Her hands were in her lap. For 1 full block, nothing. 2 blocks, 3. Then, eyes still on the window. "That woman is going to call her daughter in about 4 minutes." Andrei kept both hands on the wheel. He said nothing. They drove. At exactly 4 minutes, his phone buzzed against the center console. He glanced down at the screen. Priya. He looked back at the road. He let it ring. He let it go to voicemail. He and Dot drove in silence. Priya called 11 times over 3 days. Andre let everyone go to voicemail. He didn't delete them. He didn't listen to them either. They sat in his phone like evidence, which, technically, they were. Travis scheduled the meeting for Thursday morning, 9 o'clock. A conference room on the 14th floor of his firm's building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a long oak table, water glasses already set out when Andre arrived. Travis was standing at the window in a charcoal suit, reviewing a document. He looked up when Andre walked in. "Ready?" Travis said. "Been ready," Andre said. They didn't say anything else. They didn't need to. Priya arrived 8 minutes late with her attorney, a man named Gerald Pitts, broad-shouldered and soft-eyed, the kind of lawyer who was good at closings and bad at fights. He had a leather portfolio under one arm and the look of someone who had been called in a hurry and had been reviewing the case in the car. He introduced himself to Travis with a handshake that was slightly too firm. Priya sat down without looking at Andre directly. She was dressed carefully. Neutral colors, understated jewelry, the visual language of someone who wanted to appear reasonable. Her hands were folded on the table. Her expression said, "I'm open to dialogue." Andre sat across from her and said nothing. Travis opened his binder. It took 41 minutes. Not because the case was complicated, because Gerald Pitts tried 4 different angles and Travis closed every one of them like rooms with locks already changed. Pitts suggested the joint account withdrawals were shared household expenses, a standard argument that collapsed immediately when Travis placed Greta Mbecki's certified forensic report on the table. 19 pages. Every withdrawal cross-referenced to a vendor receipt with a date and a description. Floral arrangements, wedding ceremony, string quartet, 4-hour engagement, catering deposit, event, 70-plus guests. There was no interpretation required. The numbers said exactly what they were. Pitts tried a second angle, that Priya had a reasonable expectation of shared property rights given the length of the relationship and the engagement. Travis slid the trust documents across the table without comment. Carol's co-executor designation, the protective clause in plain language, the formal notice, already filed and recorded. The property had never been accessible to Priya. Not legally, not ever. Pitts looked at the documents for a moment, then looked at Priya. Priya looked at the table. Travis placed the engagement ring demand letter in front of Pitts next. Appraised value, $6,400. He had attached the appraisal certificate to the back. Pitts said, "I'll need to discuss." "You can discuss it now," Travis said. "We're all here." Gerald Pitts closed his portfolio. He leaned back in his chair with the quiet exhaustion of a man who understood, fully and finally, that he had walked into something that had already been decided. Then Andre spoke. He didn't look at Pitts. He looked at Priya. She felt it and raised her eyes slowly, the way someone looks up when they hear a sound they can't immediately place. Andre's voice was calm, not the forced calm of someone suppressing something, the real kind, the kind that comes from the other side of something, the kind that has already done its grieving. "I'm not going to take long," he said. "I just want to say one thing." Pitts started to interject. Travis put a single hand flat on the table. Pitts went quiet. Andre kept his eyes on Priya. "You had a real life," he said. "A real house. A real man who would have given you everything he had. And you looked at all of that." He paused, just a beat. "Not for drama, but for accuracy. And you decided it was a stepping stone." Priya's jaw tightened. She didn't speak. "You planned a wedding to someone else before you said yes to my ring," he said. "You paid for it with my money. You stood in my grandfather's backyard and made promises to another man. In front of people eating food I paid for." He let that sit for exactly 1 second. "You had a real life. You traded it for a performance." He held her gaze for a moment longer. "I hope the pictures were worth it." Then he sat back. He was done. The room was completely silent, the kind of silent that doesn't invite anyone to fill it. Priya looked away first. Pitts leaned toward her and said something low near her ear. She stared at the window. After a moment, she gave a small, tight nod. "My client is prepared to settle," Pitts said. The $22,000 repayment was structured across 90 days. Most of it, Travis told Andre later, would come quietly from Brett's family's attorney, who had called Travis the previous afternoon, asking pointed questions about the scope of potential civil exposure. Brett's family had done the math. Paying was cheaper than discovery. 3 days after the meeting, a plain envelope arrived by courier at Travis's office. No note inside. Just the ring, nestled in a small velvet pouch, the way it had come from the jeweler. Andre held it for a moment, turned it once in his hand. Then he set it on the corner of Travis's desk. "Handle the sale," he said. Travis nodded. Andre picked up his keys and walked out of the office. He took the elevator down to the lobby, pushed through the front doors, and stepped out into the afternoon sun. He drove across town. He pulled into the driveway of his house, cut the engine, and sat for just a second. Then he got out. He walked up the front steps. He unlocked the door and went inside. 6 months later, Andre Washington was repainting his kitchen on a Saturday morning, and the house smelled like fresh paint and coffee. He had taped off the trim the night before, careful strips of blue painter's tape along every edge, the way his grandfather had taught him. "Preparation is the work," the old man used to say. "The brush is just the last part." Andre had never forgotten that. He didn't think he was capable of forgetting it. He dipped the roller, pressed it to the wall, and pulled it smooth. Priya and Brett were gone within 6 weeks of the settlement. Brett's family had insisted, quietly, the way people with old money handle embarrassment, which is to say, without ever naming it directly. They simply made it clear that Nashville had become inconvenient. Priya and Brett relocated to Atlanta. The marriage lasted 8 months. Andre heard this through Travis, who heard it through the kind of professional network that notices when opposing counsel goes silent. He didn't feel much when he heard it. Less than he expected. Maybe nothing at all. What he understood, distantly, was that Brett had eventually figured out what Andre figured out in the back of a rideshare on a quiet street, with too many cars parked along the curb. That Priya had never really been in the room with either of them. She had been somewhere else the whole time, performing for an audience that only existed in her own head. Brett's family had pulled back from him too, once the full financial picture surfaced, not dramatically, just the slow, steady withdrawal of people who had done the math and decided the investment wasn't returning what they needed it to. Brett was left with a smaller life than he'd started with, which was the most honest verdict anyone had ever delivered on him. Priya was working somewhere in Charlotte now, mid-level marketing job, a city where nobody knew her. Andre had heard this exactly once, registered it, and moved on in the same breath. Ruth Holloway had not pretended. That was the thing about her. She was too proud and too decent to perform ignorance she didn't have. She hadn't broadcast anything. She hadn't needed to. She had simply continued being the woman she had always been, in the community she had always been part of, and the truth had moved through that network the way water moves through a crack in concrete, slowly, permanently, without anyone having to push it. Andre didn't take any satisfaction from that. He just noted it as accurate. He refilled his coffee, came back to the kitchen wall, and kept rolling. The regional promotion had come through the same month as the settlement, embedded in a contract offer he'd been sitting on for 2 weeks, waiting until his head was clear enough to read it properly. He'd read it twice, asked one question, and signed. The title change came with a salary bump that let him redo the back patio in real stone. Not the composite material he'd settled for the first time around. Real stone. Dark gray, slightly rough to the touch, the kind that held heat from the afternoon sun and felt solid underfoot in a way that the other stuff never had. He'd done the work himself on a long weekend in October. Travis had come over and handed him tools and made bad jokes and held the level when Andre needed a second set of eyes. His wife, Simone, had sat on the new patio furniture with their 3-month-old daughter sleeping against her shoulder and declared the stone the best decision Andre had ever made in his life. Travis had told her she was forgetting the decision to be his college roommate. Simone had told him that was debatable. It had been a good afternoon. Dot came for Sunday dinners now, regularly, the way she should have been doing for years. She brought things, a side dish, a cutting from her garden, once a framed photograph of Andre's grandfather standing in front of this same house in 1987 that she had found while cleaning out a closet, and had not said a word about until she set it on the kitchen table and watched Andre's face. Carol came when she could, and always stayed longer than she planned. She brought sweet potato pie every single time without exception, as if it were a condition of entry, and nobody had ever asked her to stop. The garden bed was Andre's. He had built it himself in the backyard. Raised cedar frame, good soil, the right depth. He'd placed it exactly where the wedding aisle had been. Deliberately. Not out of anger. Out of something quieter than that. Something closer to reclamation. He had planted tomatoes in April. By August, they were coming in so heavy the cages could barely hold them. Big, dark red, splitting at the seams with their own weight. The best thing that yard had ever produced, by a significant margin. He had met Jade on a job site 3 weeks ago. A structural engineer, sharp and direct. The kind of person who asked good questions and listened to the full answer. They had talked for 40 minutes in a parking lot after a site walkthrough while the rest of the crew packed up around them. She had asked about the house. He must have mentioned it. He couldn't remember exactly how. And he had told her he'd built most of it himself. She had looked at him with genuine interest. Not impressed for politeness interest. Real interest. "Are you proud of it?" she asked. He had considered the question longer than she expected. She waited, which told him something about her. "Yeah," Andre said. "I really am." He set the roller down on a Saturday morning with fresh paint on his hands and coffee going cold on the counter, and he went out to the backyard. He had a flat of late-season seedlings sitting near the garden bed. He was pushing the calendar a little, but the forecast looked warm enough to try. He knelt down in the dirt, pressed each seedling into the soil, firm and deliberate, covered the roots with both hands, and packed the earth down. The same hands that had laid tile and rebuilt a porch from the subfloor up and signed contracts, and set a ring on Travis's desk without looking back. The same hands that had built everything worth keeping. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.